Hello, this is Bill Sullivan. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Denodo, the logical data platform company. Joining Mr. Ted Cotterill, the Chief Privacy Officer and General Counsel for Indiana's Data Agency and the founding Secretary and Treasurer of StateRAMP, for today's discussion on behalf of Chief Data Officer Magazine. Ted, we're honored to have you with us and excited to learn about what you're up to there in Indiana. Can you give us an example, either a small agency or a large agency, a use case which you're able to discuss, where you did that? You created the product, and then the agency was happy with it. It demonstrated the success of the concept, and perhaps you used it then as an illustration to other agencies.
Yeah, and I mean, I think an easy early example was we had a smaller agency, and they had a full-time equivalent employee that was spending 20 or so days each month manually compiling data for a report. I mean, our team looked at this and went, absolutely, we can address this. We automated that report, created a job, and enabled that role. Then, if you think about, you deliver on the technical solution, but then we worked with our centralized personnel department and that agency and enabled that role to be reclassified as a business intelligence role. So
Right.
now they can have that proficiency in their office that they didn't have before. That's an early example. If I think more recently, we have examples around the speed with which we were able to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic with
Hmm.
data, bringing external researchers and PhD level folks, because the data sharing agreements were done. Legal didn't need to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks negotiating agreements and getting in front of the value that could be delivered by delivering on these use cases. And we also then were able to bring, I mentioned the researchers,
Yep.
bring them in an efficient way without a bunch of contracts, because of our legal framework that we have. And then at the same time, and we got lucky here, we had just launched a cloud-based virtual desktop environment for data sharing with researchers. So it's a containerized system where researchers from multiple organizations could be credentialed, come in, get access to the data that they need, collaborate around it, generate products, hand their insights to the state health commissioner or the state epidemiologist. So right away, both legal and technical, we delivered on COVID in a way that I think was pretty unique.
That is fascinating. Don't underestimate, I meant the importance of being able to repurpose a person away from what is effectively a non-value add job, generating data reports, and putting them on something which really advances the business of government more. I mentioned during our conversation, I ran ERP for about 15 years, and I saw that countless times. PeopleSoft, Oracle, SAP, where somebody who was spending a lot of time and effort on a non-value added technology or reporting task, yet really understood the business of their agency, could be repurposed to actually advance the interests of that agency. So that's a really important point that you identified. Curious if you saw any use cases, the identification of fraud, or either across human services or anything in the criminal justice space.
There were some early use cases with respect to unemployment compensation fraud,
Yep.
that the Management Performance Hub, when operating under executive order, was involved in. I wasn't. I was at ion.gov during that time and don't have all of the details.
Okay.
One that's related, not as much to fraud, but on the unemployment compensation side that I think I would cite now is credit to our Department of Workforce Development. Their chief of staff and their CIO had this idea of creating an AI-enabled workforce recommendation engine. So in essence, a UI, an unemployment insurance claimant, once they're in the system now, as of about a month ago, can opt into a career recommendation based on their work history, their education level, and that model has been trained on these massive education and workforce data sets that MPH has access to. Now, credit to them for seeing that this would be valuable and will help our UI claimants kind of move to the next level, right, in their own professional careers.
Right.
But from our perspective, we were thinking, okay, how do we during the planning, design, development of this AI model, how do we enable the right individuals to access the right data for the right purposes? Kind of the cornerstone of data privacy in product development. And we worked really closely with their team to train the model in an MPH enabled environment, separate that from the underlying data so that this maybe the student data and things like that weren't going over to an agency that might not have a statutory authorization that's very clear to access it. Really did it the right way by working together.
Yeah. So again, establishing trust across agency borders, bringing knowledgeable folks to help the people in the agencies to do their jobs more efficiently. It rolls forward under its own weight, right? I mean, it's just
Right.
it gains steam across the state. Good for you. Any other examples you would, successes? Any advice that you would offer folks that are trying this to avoid? That we maybe there were some
It's
times that didn't work out quite as well as you might have hoped,
Yeah,
or
don't
ran in.
force it.
Don't
That's
force it.
the Don't force it. And you've been doubling down on this, and I'm hoping that it's coming through for me. The idea of winning friends by adding value, that's the way to do it. There in government, there's always going to be bureaucracy. You always have to work through that. You have to think creatively. You have to find, particularly if in my realm, if the bureaucracy rests with counsel and other business units, um, build relationships with them, really articulate the why and the how. They're often very interested in the how.
Yeah.
The what legally, how do we do this? What do the mechanics look like? All of the links in the chain around data flows and things like that. Authorities, and you have to read federal rules with the idea that we want to get to yes, right? Let's not say no. Maybe it's a yes, but let's get there.
Right. What can we do? Right.
That's right.
Well, speaking of which, the rules, how often do you find yourself back in front of the legislature? And, what kind of reporting do you give them to ensure the continued sustainment of your efforts? Obviously, they're successful, but the legislature is going to look at it and say, why and how much more money do you need? And what do you think resonates with them?
Yeah, so on a biennial basis, every 2 years we have a budget cycle in Indiana on the odd years. And we've been very fortunate that the legislature continues to support the Management Performance Hub at about $9 million a year, which was our initial appropriation in 2017. We have, as I mentioned, we've attempted to sort of build on that by contributing to agencies that have federal funding, creating platforms and products that then we can all benefit from. So
Right.
we get that exponential value by funneling that money to a partner that can leverage it in a meaningful way. Most recently, I was fortunate enough to testify before our interim Commerce Committee on AI policy. So something that we've been working on. The Management Performance Hub has some data governance functions across the spectrum of the executive branch, and we're making a big push to put some guardrails around. We want to be an enabler of AI enabled systems, but we want to ensure that we're doing it the right way and adopting trustworthy AI in Indiana. So got to share with our friends in the legislature that story.
Wow, fantastic. Have you, look, the states are the laboratories of democracy for the country. Have you had the opportunity to come to Washington and discuss some of the things you're doing there in Indiana?
At conferences, certainly.
Right.
Spoke on behalf of State Ramp, the nonprofit that I work with, during a FedRAMP summit recently, to help tell that story. Certainly nothing before Congress, but I do think our state CDO attended a White House summit recently around data. So we're always a part of these conversations, usually less direct. We also realize that there's a lot of value in having our partners tell our stories. So particularly at the beginning, everybody expected, and I say at the beginning, 2017, 2018, everybody expected the CDO and my colleagues to be out talking about data, talking about MPH. they were always surprised when it was the Secretary of Education or the Deputy Chief of Staff in the governor's office or somebody in one of those roles, the Secretary of Family and Social Services Administration, which in Indiana is Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, early childhood education. I mean, these are large agencies that make a tremendous impact in the lives of Hoosiers when they're talking about the value that data has delivered to their ops, to their teams, that we get more return out of that than the 9 times that we go out.
Yeah, absolutely. To the degree that you're comfortable discussing some of the technology, are there any technology approaches that you have seen that are used to aggregate all the, I mean, the state has vast amounts of data that you're using to aggregate it for the purposes of, analytics or fraud detection or better interagency cooperation?
Yeah, so we pull from 70 or so source systems across state government. You have to remember, government at any level wasn't really designed to address these complex challenges that we're seeing in society today. So we have these verticals that we've talked about. We have a health and human services vertical and a public safety vertical. Well, often the recidivism rate can show up over here in a health and human services context, or in an education and workforce context, or vice versa.
Right.
So we leverage from a tech perspective a well-known in memory, a relational database management tool, and then a cloud-based record linkage so that we can ensure accuracy of our record linkage. Again, it's probabilistic, but accuracy in the aggregate as we generate these products. And then we have from the cloud perspective, velocity to meet our business user use cases. So if an agency chief of staff or somebody in the governor's office comes to us, we think we have this policy challenge. We'd really like to see the data. We can put that together very quickly, and it moves the starting line forward so that we can deliver value faster.
Right. Outstanding. It's one of the things I have the privilege of representing Denodo. We get involved into a lot of these discussions at the federal level where you want to share data, but you have to ensure that people seeing the data are able to have the authorization to see it. So we as a platform, we're able to catalog the data. We're able to do role-based access security to ensure that, folks that see it can see it. And then, of course, we feed most of the analytics tools, data science tools, and we do this across, all the major clouds. I assume being in aggregate, the state of Indiana would certainly be a Fortune 100 company. I assume you probably have all the major cloud providers operating in the state government.
Yeah, I think it's well known Indiana's primarily a Microsoft shop, just given sort of our historic approach. But certainly, yes, we've got pockets of a little bit of everything around the enterprise of state government.
Sure. That's great. So moving forward, what are your 3 strategic objectives? Doesn't have to be 3, could be more, could be less, but your objectives moving forward for your organization, your personal mission?
Yeah, for me right now, the focus is, I talked about our AI policy, catalyzing trustworthy AI. You hear about alignment, outputs that align with our values. If a similarly situated human was making this decision that's now going to be AI enabled, how close? What's the delta there? To do that, we're building a policy for our executive branch agencies that adopts the NIST AI risk management framework as a maturity assessment, which I think is unique. We've shared this with some of our partners in other states. So during the planning, design, development of an AI-enabled system, our vendors that are involved, our state agency partners that are involved in that process, are building to the risk management framework. So those 72 subcategories in the framework, and then pre-deployment for significant systems. We're trying to draw this line. It's a difficult one to draw for significant systems. Then we'll work with them to conduct a pre-deployment maturity assessment. Hey, what's our maturity against this subcategory related to bias, right? We don't want our AI-enabled systems to perpetuate biases that are seen as negative.
Right.
So things like that, right? Have we addressed the cybersecurity risks associated with this system? Are we respecting individual privacy? What's the IP situation look like? That AI is right now probably at the top of the list.
Yep.
And then just in the last couple months, our team has designated a privacy officer, which within each of our 100+ business units. And last week we held training in the Indiana State House, actually in our House chamber, for 65 of those privacy officers. The International Association of Privacy Professionals flew in a trainer for 2 days to present in person to 65 of those privacy officers. And now the Management Performance Hub is funding this. Those individuals are going to have the opportunity to test and certify as certified information privacy professionals. So the CIPM designation with the IAPP. So
Okay.
the idea there, if we're going to do data, if we're going to continue to drive innovation with data, we want the people that are in these business units to be able to put those privacy glasses on, look through that lens and say, well, maybe it's we need to stop here. We want the right individuals to be seeing the right data for the right purposes, for the right duration, and we're going to enable them to know which questions to ask, knowing that our team will be the backstop. And then from there, continuing to build out this privacy program so that we're enabling all of these privacy officers to have the tools that they need to excel.
So take full advantage of the technology that's available, but have a human interaction to prevent the creation of Skynet, for lack of a better analogy. Yeah.
That's right. We just recognize that we're a small team. We've certainly built the privacy, the data science, the governance function within the Management Performance Hub. So from a policy perspective, we can help to drive the ship in large part, but it's really on our business units. They have their own data officers. They have their own CIOs. Now they have their own privacy officers to sit alongside those folks with that sort of regulatory policy, maybe even a legal lens, but understanding the technology and asking the right questions as they come up.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time today, Ted.
All right. You too, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.